Before we begin, take a moment to breathe. If you find value in stories that blend human emotion with timeless wisdom, consider subscribing to the channel. Your presence here supports mindful content in a noisy world. Now let us enter the story. Emma sat across from Mark at their kitchen table, her fingers tapping a slow, irritated rhythm against her coffee mug. The morning sun pooled across the counter, softening the tension in the air, but nothing could dissolve the edge in her voice. "You're seriously going to Bali? For a month? In the middle of everything that's happening here?" she asked, eyes narrowed. Mark, in his usual quiet calm, shrugged. "It's a photography retreat. I've been planning it for a year. You said you were okay with it. I was okay with it before your exhibition flopped and before Lena started screwing up your PR. Don't you think now is the time to focus?" Emma wasn't yelling. She never yelled. Her voice was cool, reasonable, firm. She called it honest communication. Mark called it something else, but he rarely said it out loud. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Emma, I don't need fixing. I need space. That's what this trip is about." Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. Space is a luxury people without responsibilities can afford. There it was, again, that quiet erasure of his autonomy wrapped in concern, wrapped in love. To anyone else, Emma was the ideal partner, supportive, intelligent, always there to offer a solution. But to Mark, she was a careful storm. Each suggestion she made came with an invisible leash, each favor a subtle weight. She called it love. He called it control. What made it harder was that she didn't see it. In her mind, she was helping him, protecting him, guiding him toward a better version of himself. Wasn't that what love was for? That night, while Emma scrolled through her phone, looking at potential freelance gigs Mark should apply to, he stared at the ceiling in the dark, wondering when exactly his wife had started speaking to him like a project manager. In truth, it hadn't started with the Bali trip. It began years ago when she quietly suggested he abandon street photography for weddings, better money. When she started reviewing his clients' contracts without asking, just making sure you're safe. When she introduced herself at his shows as his business partner. It was always subtle, always sugar-coated. It was always love. But behind the words, there was a growing tightness in Mark's chest. A feeling he couldn't name until he did. He was suffocating. Emma, of course, had no idea. In her world, she was the one making sacrifices. She was the one anchoring their life. Mark was the one drifting, careless and unpredictable. That night, she spoke in her sleep, murmured something about Lena botching another campaign pitch, and Mark sat up and stared at her, the moonlight casting silver lines on her face. He wondered, when did love stop feeling like home? The manager who cared too much. Lena glanced at her phone and sighed. Another Slack message from Emma. It was Saturday again. Quick thought, let's reshape the pitch deck before Monday. I know it's your day off, but just 30 minutes? Lena typed out a polite thumbs up emoji, then deleted it. Then typed sure and hit send. Across the city, Emma took a sip of her espresso and smiled. Efficient, dedicated, loyal, just like she'd trained her to be. Lena had once admired Emia's brilliance, her fearlessness in board meetings, her poise. But lately, admiration had curdled into anxiety. Every compliment felt double-edged. Every spontaneous one-on-one masked another layer of scrutiny. Emma praised her like a daughter, but managed her like an investment. "Lena, I just want you to succeed," she would say often, adjusting her tone to sound maternal, almost spiritual. "I see myself in you." But Lena didn't want to be Emma. She didn't want to feel guilty for turning off her phone, or anxious when Emma tagged her in messages at 11 p.m. or numb when she realized her weekends no longer belonged to her. And yet leaving felt like betrayal. After all, Emma had given her a chance, nurtured her, believed in her. At least that's what Emma kept repeating. The truth was more complex. Emma's nurturing wasn't unconditional. It came with silent expectations, gratitude, loyalty, obedience. Dissent was interpreted as immaturity, distance as disrespect. What Emma called mentorship was a subtle form of control masked as devotion. Later that week, Lena made a mistake in a client call minor forgettable. But Emma called her in, eyes cool and smile tight. "I'm not angry," she began, her voice dipped in calm. "But I'm disappointed. I thought we had built something more aligned." Lena's chest tightened. She wasn't sure if she was being reprimanded, guilt-tripped, or gaslighted. She muttered an apology. Emma nodded, then said something Lena never forgot. "Be careful, Lena. Don't let small cracks become fractures, especially in relationships like ours. Ours. That word. That possessiveness." Emma left the room, but her presence lingered like smoke. Lena sat in the conference room alone. For a long time, she remembered something she'd read once in a dusty book she picked up at a thrift store. The one who seeks to shape others is shaped most by fear. Control is the camouflage of the frightened heart, inspired by Buddhist thought. And then she understood. Emma wasn't invincible. She was terrified of losing grip, of chaos, of not being needed. Her control was not strength. It was weakness dressed as care. And Lena? She was finally ready to stop mistaking loyalty for silence. That night, Lena opened her laptop, stared at her resignation letter, then closed it again. Not yet, but soon. She had already left in her mind. Excellent. Here's chapter 3. Old friends, old chains. Mark hadn't seen Jake in over a year, but when he walked into the cafe, it was as if nothing had changed. Jake still wore that easy grin, the half-mocking glint in his eye that always danced between charm and contempt. "You look different, man," Jake said, clapping him on the back. Tamed. Domestic. "Who are you, and what have you done with the old Mark?" Mark smiled thinly. "People grow up, Jake." Jake snorted. "Yeah, sure. Or they give in." The conversation limped along, awkward in places, peppered with nostalgia. They laughed about their old road trip, the night they got locked out of that hostel in Prague, the time Jake threw up on Mark's favorite sneakers. But then Jake leaned forward, his voice lower, his expression more serious. "Be real with me. You happy?" he asked. "Because from the outside it looks like your wife's got you on a tight leash." Mark blinked. Jake chuckled. "What? You think I don't see it? You used to be wild, spontaneous. Now you're scheduling your life around someone else's shadow." Mark stirred his coffee, then looked up. "Emma's not the enemy. Jake rolled his eyes. "She doesn't have to be, but I don't recognize you anymore." There it was, that old script. Jake always held on to the past like a passport, demanding that Mark prove his loyalty by staying the same. Any growth, any evolution, was seen as betrayal. "You're choosing someone who shrinks you," Jake said, more quietly now. "That's not love, man. That's a cage." Mark didn't reply. He knew Jake meant well in his own way, but what he didn't see was that his version of freedom came with its own walls. Emotional detachment, shallow connections, pride disguised as independence. Jake's expectations were their own kind of leash. Their friendship had always been intense, built on shared rebellion and mutual escape. But now, Jake was the one unable to let go of a version of Mark that no longer existed. That night, Mark sat alone on the balcony, Emma already asleep inside. He thought about all the ways people say, "I love you," without using those words. Emma said it through logistics and careful planning. Jake said it through brutal honesty and emotional tests. And in both cases, love came with an undercurrent of ownership. He remembered something a monk had once said to him in a tiny temple in Chiang Mai. "When we fear losing someone, we often grip harder. But love that grips is not love, it is attachment. And attachment always demands." Mark realized he'd spent most of his life ping-ponging between being shaped and being tested, between Emma's structure and Jake's chaos. And in both cases he had lost the ability to simply be. He closed his eyes. No more proving. No more defending his choices to people who wanted him to play a part in their story. He didn't need to leave them. He just needed to stop letting them decide who he was. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Emma stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. Her phone buzzing on the table behind her, calls from Lena, messages from HR, emails stacking like bricks. Everything was falling apart. Lena had resigned with barely a word. The client they'd spent months courting pulled out without explanation. And Mark had gone. He left her a note. Nothing dramatic. Just a folded sheet tucked under his camera bag. "I'm not abandoning you. I'm returning to myself. I hope one day you'll return to you too." She didn't cry. Emma didn't do tears. She did timelines, action plans, silence. But now, none of her usual defenses were working. The house felt hollow. Every shelf and corner, once curated with control, now screamed with absence. Her calendar, her systems, her habits, they couldn't fill the space Mark's quiet withdrawal had carved open. For the first time in years, Emma had no one to manage, no one to steer, no one to become a mirror for her own value. She sat down, not at her desk, on the floor. Something inside had cracked, not from betrayal, but from recognition. She wasn't losing everything. She was seeing it clearly for the first time. All these years, her love had been strategy. Her support had been fear in disguise. She hadn't protected people, she had suffocated them in soft bindings. And herself? She'd become a stranger. She picked up a book Mark had once left half-read beside the bed. A dusty old volume with creased pages. She flipped it open at random. "Regard this fleeting world as a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud." The Diamond Sutra. Something shifted in her. All her structures were bubbles. all her plans lightning. She had tried to freeze what was never meant to be held. She closed the book and let the silence in. For once, she didn't need to fix anything. She needed to listen, not to the voices around her, to the ones she had buried for years under ambition, noise, and roles, her own. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of hearing it. But insight without integration is like light without warmth. Emma began to see how often "I love you" had meant "stay as I need you to be." How many times her kindness was a contract, her care a currency. In the quiet that followed Mark's departure and Lena's resignation, she faced a choice, not how to win them back, but how to meet herself without a script. Transformation didn't come with affirmations or journal prompts. It came through unraveling, through undoing. So she began again, not as someone's wife or someone's boss, but as a woman willing to live without control, willing to listen, willing to love without possession. Here are 6 practices to recognize and release controlling love. 1. Pause before offering help. Ask, is this truly for their benefit or my comfort? 2. Notice the language, should, must, and if I were you, often mask attachment. 3. Let silence be safe. If their distance threatens your identity, explore why. 4. Separate care from control. Love listens, control corrects. 5. Practice absence. Let others make mistakes without rescuing them. 6. Return to presence. When fear arises, return to breath, not behavior. When you let go of clinging, love becomes space. And only in space can freedom and intimacy coexist. If this story touched something within you, share it with someone who may need it too. Subscribe for more narratives where ancient wisdom meets the struggles of modern life. And remember, sometimes the greatest clarity comes after we lose everything we thought mattered.